just a...
Hello, hopefully you can hear me again now. Thank you for taking the time to attend this webinar given by the Formulation Special Interest Group. My name is Colin Tatham. I'm the Projects Director at Chemistry Innovation and a component part of the Formulation Special Interest Group that's been funded by the Technology Strategy Board, and it's hosted by Chemistry Innovation, and we're working to drive progress along with our delivery partners, the details of which we'll provide as we go through the webinar. But in terms of the delivery partners we've got online today and contributing to this webinar, we've got Jim Bullock at Intelligent Formulation, Jenny Klukas at Cogent, and also on the line and crucial support for the various work streams are the professional societies of the Institution of Chemical Engineers and the Royal Society of Chemistry. So just looking at the list of attendees, it's an impressive list so far. Pleasing cross-section from industry, so we've got large manufacturers, some smaller supply chain companies and technology providers, a number of academics and the professional societies as well. So that's good representation. Just to quickly run through the agenda, I'm going to cover off the first section. For those that have missed the launch webinar for the Formulation SIG, I'm going to take a bit of a step back before we get into the detail of the skills and training agenda and set the broader context and communicate the opportunity and provide clarity as to the purpose of the special interest group and what we're setting out to achieve. Jim Bullock, the CEO of Intelligent Formulation Limited, will provide a review of the professional development needs expressed by industry thus far. Jenny Klukas, the Strategy Director at Cogent, will provide an overview of ongoing activities in this area, and then we'll hear from Jim again in terms of how companies can help guide the Formulation Special Interest Group activity. This is very much a two-way engagement and activity, and I think Jim and Jenny will communicate some specifics of the type of feedback and input we'd like from you, but I just would like to make the point before we start that one of the core purposes of this webinar is to stimulate some meaningful engagement over a few areas that are relevant to the skills and training agenda for formulation science and technology. So, an overview of the opportunity for industry. So what is the opportunity? Here we have a list of product sectors and markets that are all driven, at least in part, by developments in formulation science and application of those technologies. So not to run through the list line by line, but you can see that these are sizable industries, sizable markets. Looking at the bullet points at the bottom, formulation is critical to a wide range of business and markets. A lot of growth is expected, particularly in emerging economies, and the UK, we believe, is well positioned to capitalise on these expected growth opportunities. So when you look at all those markets added up, I think it accounts for nearly $1,500 billion US of market. If you look at the total global value of the chemical sector altogether in 2010, that was $3,500 billion US. And looking at a number of reports, we're estimating over 45% growth between 2010 and 2015. So we're looking towards significant growth up to total chemical sector markets of 4.9 thousand billion. So if you estimate that 40 to 50% of those markets rely on formulation science in some shape or form to underpin the products then this is a significant opportunity in terms of market size and the rate of market growth. So, like I just said, we've got a huge growing global market, differentiation for emerging global markets, sustainable product design, and this is all technology driven, and some relevant technologies and product areas are listed there. We want to make a shift from empirical kind of black art approaches to more intelligent, informed, science-based design processes that are enabled by advances and convergence of a number of enabling disciplines, and those are listed there. So cross-disciplinary efforts and effective working across those disciplines is key here. There is a strong potential for the UK to meet this demand. We're not, as the formulation SIG, starting from a standing start here. We've been working in this area for a number of years now, but I think as clarity over the opportunity for the UK has emerged, the Technology Strategy Board have worked it into their manufacturing strategy and invested in the special interest group to help accelerate progress and to land some very specific outputs and outcomes. But in terms of strengths within the UK and how we can, why we're positioned to respond to this opportunity, we've got a well-established industry base, route through to global markets, and these are rapidly changing and growing global markets against which we're very well positioned to respond, and there's huge scope for cross-sector collaboration. So for those who haven't come across Technology Strategy Board special interest groups previously, these are some kind of generic descriptors that let you know what they're there to do. But they are single national overarching networks in a specific field of technology or in business application. So it brings together a variety of organisations, such as businesses, universities, research and technology organisations, the finance community, to name a few potential partners within a special interest group. And it provides a range of activities and initiatives to enable the exchange of knowledge and stimulation of innovation amongst the community. But I guess for us, in essence, like I said, we're not starting from square one. We've built a lot of momentum in recent years in this specific area. So for the Formulation Special Interest Group, this is an injection of dedicated resource to a group of well-selected partners to accelerate progress and deliver some specific outcomes that I can list in a later slide. So specifically, the Formulation Special Interest Group, Technology Strategy Board funded and coordinated by the Chemistry Innovation Knowledge Transfer Network. The delivery partners, as listed during the introduction: intelligent formulation, the high value manufacturing catapult, the CPI is the most relevant component of that catapult for this specific piece of work. Cogent, the Royal Society of Chemistry, and the Institution of Chemical Engineers. So we've got 9 months of concerted activity taking us to the start of April 2013 with potential for extension. The remit is to provide leadership and a focal point for the UK formulation agenda to drive economic growth through innovation. And that's a very broad kind of vision. When we get down to the specifics, the large and arguably core deliverable for us is a national formulation centre and an associated kind of suite of collaborative R&D projects. We're looking to set and support the broader national formulation agenda through engagement with industry. We can communicate more effectively specific needs through to other stakeholders and innovation organisations such as the Technology Strategy Board and the research councils in terms of strategy and programs for more fundamental science. And we want to stimulate collaborative working, particularly cross-sector, because that's a large opportunity here and relies very heavily on effective cross-sector and cross-discipline collaboration. And we want to get deeper intelligence and more effective working through supply chains and with SMEs. So what will the Formulation Special Interest Group deliver? I won't read this out word for word, but a full proposal and detailed business plan that will be developed with industry and with other key stakeholders for a national formulation centre. And where we're up to with that thus far is detailed in the launch webinar, a recording of which is still available on Connect if you wish to have a look at that. We need to develop a critical mass of key stakeholders using an industry leadership group and develop a national action plan for UK formulation. So the skills and training agenda, which is the core focus today, sits very neatly within item number 3. I've mentioned or alluded to a suite of potential collaborative R&D projects and consortia and an associated longer-term project building program that can translate some of these projects into the National Centre at the right time. And we will develop further recommendations for follow-on activity across the breadth of the scope of the SIG, including skills and training, as one of the final stages of this part of the Formulation Special Interest Group. So I don't want to dwell too long on this kind of structure diagram, but it basically illustrates a number of work packages which cannot succeed without the inputs and connection through to the other associated work packages. But number 1 is the Formulation Centre and the broader access for industry. Number 2 is an associated stream of activity on project building and networking. And work package 3 is skills and training. So Jim will introduce that shortly. And underpinning all of those is a mapping of science and technology needs and gaps. And for most of these streams, we do have some intelligence and some knowledge of what's happening in industry and on the relevant kind of science and skills landscapes now, but we're working to improve that through a broader consultation with companies and other key delivery partners. So just a brief excerpt from the work package 3 detail here. The role here is to develop and deliver activities identifying and addressing skills and training gaps across the full spectrum of formulating activity. The lead partner is Intelligent Formulation, but there's crucial input from a number of other partners, Cogent, who will speak later during this presentation, and the professional bodies in the shape of the Royal Society of Chemistry and the Institution of Chemical Engineers. But none of this is a closed shop. We are really keen to hear from industrial members. That's critical for the success of this. So I guess on the diagram here, we're currently in the left-hand 2 boxes that cover off July and August. And through this webinar, we're trying to make a start on the 3rd box, which is to gather deeper, more specific input on UK skills situation and gaps. So with that in mind, I'd like to hand over to Jim Bullock from Intelligent Formulation, who will review the professional development needs expressed by industry. If everyone out there is like me, then you can't hear Jim. Let me just see if I can connect through to him on the chat to make sure that he's unmuted his line. Jenny, can you unmute your line and
can you hear me, Colin? Because I think I am unmuted.
I'm unmuted. Yeah. Can you hear me now, Colin?
I can, Jim, yeah, but that's the first time I've heard you, so if you'd like to start again, that'd be great.
Well, apologies for the technical problems there, and welcome everybody also to the webinar today. One of the things that I think was very clear to us even before Intelligent Formulation was founded a couple of years ago was that the companies in all sorts of sectors have real needs and gaps in skills and training provision in formulation, and that was having an impact on their potential to innovate. So it's very clear, it was very clear to us at that stage that the capacity to innovate in companies is critically dependent on the right skills being available to do that innovation amongst the workforce. So I'd like to sort of take a little step back and go back a year or two to some findings of a survey that we undertook amongst companies in this area, and then that, if you like, is our starting point, and then we will carry on consulting with companies to refine that view. But this is the view of the world as of a year or two ago. And we talked to companies large and small, and it was quite clear then that for companies in all of those sectors that Colin's mentioned earlier, ongoing expertise and knowledge of formulation science and technology was absolutely essential for the success of those companies. Essentially, those are the products that they sell. They may use other ingredients and be involved in other parts of generating value. But an expertise in science and technology formulation was absolutely critical to those companies. And is also extending across many functions within those companies. So it's not just research or discovery, but also new product development. Production requires knowledge of formulation science and technology, QC, technical marketing and applications development. Also need to understand how products are put together, designed, and how they work in terms of their formulation. But we then looked and asked companies about where are they getting their skills and training from, and the view was pretty unanimous that the current provision is very patchy, and so the companies said that they had a lot of very good scientists, but actually even those good scientists had significant skill gaps in formulation science when we're talking about technical and R&D personnel. The second challenge for companies is to use properly the many experienced individuals who have industry-specific formulation knowledge. So two challenges there. Essentially, that knowledge is often very specific, and therefore those individuals do not always find it easy to bring in knowledge from other areas outside their own industry to take forward the process of learning and innovation inside the company. And secondly, the demands on time on those experienced individuals are very high, so that the companies struggle to pass across that knowledge to less experienced individuals. Which wouldn't be so bad if companies were able to recruit graduates and other trained scientists and technologists with the qualifications from day one. But actually, if you look at most traditional university courses in areas such as chemistry and chemical engineering, they don't cover most of the relevant aspects of formulation science and technology from an industrial point of view. So there is a gap in provision from full-time education, but also although there are a great number of courses and programs available that touch on areas of formulation from a professional development point of view, so post-recruitment, that training provision is really ad hoc. And companies found it very difficult to slot the provision that's out there in short courses and other training programs into a coherent program that takes that takes a scientist on a pathway as they become more experienced and more able within their field. So a number of challenges really leading up to really patchy provision of skills in formulation. That's not to say there aren't some good examples, but those examples seem to be existing in isolation and kind of despite not because of the need of the needs of companies. So, for instance, the University of Greenwich offers an MSc in formulation science. The University of Birmingham offers a doctorate in engineering in formulation engineering. And there are single industry-focused degree courses in areas such as pharmacy and cosmetic science. And beyond the full-time education area, there's a well-established course being run out of Bristol called the Bristol College course. And this year we put together with a partner organisation a new course, a 3-day course on fundamentals of formulation. And there are a whole range of other kind of short courses. So there is a lot of material out there, but it doesn't fit together very well, and is often presented in isolation. And the big challenge, I think, from the provider side is that formulation technology is multidisciplinary. So it touches aspects of chemistry, chemical engineering, physics, materials science, and it doesn't fit very easily into classical academic disciplines. And actually, to connect the theory with the practical hands-on experience requires a combination not only of experienced academics to teach it, but also people who have had genuine experience in industry. And putting those two together, doesn't happen very easily normally. So what happens actually is that companies recruit very often, and this is what we found, they recruit chemistry or chemical engineering graduates on the whole, sometimes other disciplines, and then convert them to formulators in-house. And they do that with a combination, as we've said, of in-house experts and external training courses. But the ability of companies to do that depends absolutely critical on how deep their pockets are in terms of in-house resources and time that they can give their experienced practitioners, money that they can spend on external training, and knowledge of how to put together. So it tends to be one or two of the larger companies that do this in-house conversion particularly well, but even large companies seem to struggle, and this is what we were being told, to do this very effectively. So if you like, that process of converting non-specialist chemists and chemical engineers into formulators isn't working particularly well in industry. And we've collected a number of examples that I think are quite illustrative of what's needed. Here's a comment from Syngenta. I won't read the whole thing out, but I think the important phrases here are that formulation needs a good science-based training to it. So it's not just about empiricism and specifics of a particular industry or application. It's needed for new recruits and current employees, and they have to use that to, if you like, turn existing scientists into excellent formulation scientists. And Syngenta also pointed out the cross-disciplinary nature of formulation as well. AstraZeneca clearly see formulation development as delivering value to the business, because formulation increasingly can create opportunities for new products in the pharmaceutical industry, and that's true for other industries as well. Again, stressing the importance of using science to address those needs, and scientific knowledge being important, as well as, and that's interesting, I think, drawing on science and technology and understanding developed outside their own industry, and that's a theme that comes up quite often as well. Just pick out one more company example, and this is from a slightly different point of view. So Croda is principally an ingredient supplier rather than a formulator, but clearly as an ingredient supplier, they really have to understand formulation as well. So to maximize the performance of their ingredients, they need to understand formulation. Their synthetic chemists and application scientists have to understand how those products their products go into formulations, and they have to assist their customers and train their customers. So I think from all points of view, industry is very supportive of a more, so far, it appears to be supportive of a more joined-up approach to training and skills provision in formulation. So just to summarize those points again, what we found was that skills in formulation are absolutely essential to the major companies, and formulation science and technology underpin business success through both innovation in product and process. The current provision is unstructured and patchy. Companies use in-house experts, but that's pretty challenging to handle, and that limits the access that can be given to new knowledge. Formal tertiary education does provide some good examples, but there's strong industry support for a more joined-up approach to formulation development. So where do we go next? And this is where I'm going to lead into Jenny's presentation. Short term, one of the things we're doing is putting together short courses in formulation, and Jenny's going to talk a bit more about a structured approach to gold standards and a proposal we're putting together under the working title of a Formulation Academy. And you'll hear a bit more about that as we go along. But I think that the kind of sign-off message as far as the special interest group in formulation is concerned, so far the message appears to be that skills, training and scientific knowledge is an essential component of successful innovation in formulation. So chances for questions later, but at this point I'm going to pass straight on to Jenny. Take up the baton.
Thank you, Jim. Good afternoon, everyone. I'll just check that Colin can hear me on the grounds that if he can, the rest of you can.
Yeah, I can hear you fine, Jenny.
Thank you very much. Firstly, just add my welcome and say I'm delighted by the number of participants, particularly given we're into August, which is always a tricky month to gather people together. What I'd like to do is just follow on from where Jim sort of left his presentation to talk about some specific activities that are currently ongoing or that we are proposing to seek funding for. And these are some of the specific areas where we would then be looking at the participants in the Skills and Training Work Package 3 to actually help us and give us their opinions, comments, input, etc. Helps if I go forward. So the two areas I want to talk about then, as Jim said, are the gold standard competency framework and something with the working title of a Formulation Academy. Both of these have been under discussion before the SIG came along. So in the case of the gold standard competency framework, this is something that IF and ourselves are currently working on. We made a start in June, but the timing of having this group is ideal to bring a lot more players and companies in both formulation and the supply chain formulation into this piece of work. What I'd like to do is, for those of you who are unfamiliar, is just spend a very brief amount of time telling you what the gold standard competency framework is and how it's used, and then lead through to what we're actually doing in the realms of formulation. This is something that Cogent have been working on for the last few years with the process industries, and essentially it is a competency framework that sets out the skills, knowledge and behaviour needed for key generic roles in key parts of the science-using and science-based sectors. It's seen as aspirational because it's looking at sort of what is needed in a particular role at a particular level to actually achieve world-class performance. So it's talking about setting the top level, if you like, of skills, knowledge and behaviours for a role. Industry can then determine what level they need for particular individuals working in their particular companies. And the framework has a template that sits across each of the roles we develop, with 4 components which were originally identified by employers. And so each of these gold standard frameworks will look at both the technical, compliance, business improvement and functional behavioural requirements for a role. And I've briefly set something else about that on the next slide. And I think, therefore, we also describe this framework as being a holistic framework, because in many cases, when we've looked at role profiles, they will tend to focus more on just technical or technical and compliance and not cover all the aspects of a job in around the same extent. I think I want to emphasize that the gold standard competency framework, whilst developed with Cogent's involvement, is very much a developed by industry for industry framework. So it's led by employers, they determine the content. To all intents and purposes, we manage the process. But we have a big vision out into the future, which is that this gold standard framework would be the industry standard across the process industries going forward. And in seeking funding to help maintain and expand the framework, that is very much the vision we have shared with government. As I said, each gold standard has these four areas that it covers. So in technical competence, it's looking at the scientific, technical knowledge, scientific principles, particularly if it's a more R&D or lab-based role. But equally, this could apply to plant roles, where it's much more plant knowledge, running the operation. Compliance, safety, process safety, regulations, laboratory safety, cost regulations. So again, whatever is applicable to the role. And then also the aspect of looking at how you actually look at the quality of what you're doing and seek to improve that, and look at business improvement techniques and resource efficiency. And finally, an area that is looking at all the functional behavioural skills, knowledge and behaviour required for a particular role at a particular level. So the level of managerial or leadership responsibility will increase as the level of the role increases. And in the template, each of those components is populated by quite detailed skills, knowledge and behaviour. And also then there is a column which seeks to give examples of, if you were looking at means of acquiring that, where are either the courses, qualifications or training standards that would be applicable. Very briefly, in overview, we currently have 31 of these standards live for generic roles across the process industry, accessible on the Cogent website. And I have to say at the moment, they are being used by employers, but it's mainly medium to large employers. And part of our vision for the future is how we make them applicable and they work for the smaller players in our industries. Equally, we have a lot of support from various stakeholders, be that professional bodies, trade bodies, unions, etc., and training providers. And the bit that's part of what we're talking about today is that towards the end of last year, and for Formulation Technology in conjunction with Intelligent Formulation, we sought funding, which kicked in around April, May this year, to expand our range of gold standards. So both into formulation technology, industrial biotechnology, as it happens, warehousing explosives of less relevance in this conversation, and also seeking to expand the levels we cover. And also part of our vision for the future with our gold standard competency framework is to improve its flexibility. This links into the conversation today. More and more companies are looking for modular training, courses, flexibility, and also particularly when we're working with the SME community, short courses rather than major qualifications. Just to give you a flavour of how the gold standards are used out in industry, there's a list here which I don't intend to go through all the aspects, and this does not cover all the uses that we know of, but industry use them as an internal benchmark against any internal frameworks they have, helps them to identify where they have skill gaps and where training is required, used in looking at succession planning, so you can see what are the steps needed to take people and have them sort of ready for the next progression, or if you're doing internal promotion, etc. Particularly when Jim and I talked about developing gold standards for formulation technology, one of the things we felt it would help with is looking at having some sort of structure and pathway for developing formulation scientists, as Jim discussed. So the aspects there where it talks about identifying where training provision doesn't exist versus skills, knowledge and behaviour that's required, or where you're trying to develop long-term strategic training plans and see, as we said, that pathway going through. Having gold standards in place can help that process. So in terms of formulation technology, where we are at is that these are being developed jointly by Intelligent Formulation and Cogent. So we're bringing together Intelligent Formulation as the leading network within formulation and ourselves in terms of developing standards and training standards. And at present, we are looking to develop a minimum of 3 standards, but were employers to come along and actually talk about there are other roles that would be important to have a standard for, we can certainly consider that. The first of these standards is formulation scientist in the research and development, new product development area. At the moment, the view is that the second one we would develop would be a formulation technologist. And whilst there are some thoughts around what the third might be, that's still to be agreed and is an opportunity for employers to input their views and opinions on what would be useful to have as that third or potentially a fourth gold standard, etc. The process, just very simplified in terms of sharing today, is that we develop a first draft of one of these standards populated, in this example, for the formulation scientist, with a few industry participants, and then go on an extensive consultation process in terms of, so does this work? Have we got the right skills and knowledge listed? What are the gaps? Given that we are trying to develop something that sits across a range of companies and is not bespoke to one company, we also have to look at, well, what can we include that is common, and where is this very specialised and therefore cannot sit in a generic gold standard. This goes through an iterative process, and this is where having the SIG work package on skills and training set up now is ideal timing, so that we would like those who are interested to play their part in actually helping us shape these formulation gold standards. The first formulation scientist one is available in first draft, and for those who are interested, please contact myself or Jim and get involved in this process, and I think we would welcome that. Out of that, we develop a final version which is then signed off by industry as that gold standard. Doesn't mean it's set in tablets of stone, but at that moment we have finalised where we're at that moment in the process. So that's the formulation, that's the gold standards, a little bit about what they are and what they consist of, and what we're doing in terms of formulation technology. So that current work being funded, it's funded under the Employment Investment Fund with the UK Commission for Employment and Skills, and is ongoing through the rest of this year. And lastly, and this very much follows on from what Jim was presenting and seeing as some of the challenges, issues and opportunities that exist around formulation, is this need to have a coherent framework and structure and a set of training provision out there that industry can see a way through to actually develop the formulation scientists, technologists and other related functions that are required. So it's proposed that we are going to set up something we're loosely calling at the moment a Formulation Academy. And its role would be to provide a structure for developing skilled formulation scientists, to develop training standards that would lead through to a range of different training solutions, courses, practical workshops, maybe some with some new delivery modes, so that there are cluster courses for SMEs so they can access those easily, using distance learning and incorporating e-learning, etc. Also, the Academy would form a hub to help employers find the right solution for them. So there is some guidance and some direction on where they need to be on the pathway and how they work their way through it. And also, it would allow us to have a network of accredited training providers delivering what is seen to be quality training endorsed against training standards out to the industry. So that's very briefly an overview of what we see as the role and what we would see as the functions of this academy. At the moment, we are seeking to put an expression of interest into the latest round of growth and innovation funding funded through the UK Commission of Employment and Skills. So a proposal is under discussion between Intelligent Formulation and the Cogent Group to do that. If I just skip the next bullet, the deadlines, as always, for these things are fairly tight. So we would need to submit our expression of interest, as it says there, for the 17th of September. And then, if approved, we would get approval sometime in November, and then have probably a 3-month window within which to submit a full proposal to set this up. I suspect then with a view of getting it started around end of Q1 in 2013. If I come back to the second, and in many ways the most important bullet point there, is that this proposal will not be successful without very strong and vocal employer support. The Commission for Employment and Skills very much see all skills and training as needing to be employer-led, employer-owned. So in looking at what proposals they fund, one of their major criteria is what is the level of employer demand for this solution, in this case the academy, and their willingness to be involved in the development of training solutions and ultimately investing in training. So I hope you've heard in my voice there a heartfelt plea that in order to be successful with this, we do need you guys as employers saying this is something that we think meets the needs of our industry and helps take us forward. With that, I will hand you back to Jim, who's going to conclude the presentation part, and then I think we're going to, as they say, open up the lines to have a question and answer session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jenny, and I'm assuming that everybody can hear me at the moment. So how can companies help guide what happens in the Formulation Special Interest Group with regards to training and skills? We're very keen to continue the consultation of industry that we kind of started a year or so ago with the slides that I showed you before. So we need really to understand what companies need specifically in the area of skills and training. What are the most critical challenges? Where are some of the examples of best current practice? What have we not spotted that's really good at the moment that could be expanded and done more widely? What are the concrete links between innovation and skills, or indeed lack of skills? How important in all this are issues such as accreditation, defined standards, and concrete qualifications? As Jenny just pointed out, we're very keen to get input on the ongoing gold standard activity, as well as critically concrete offers of support for the proposed Formulation Academy, which Jenny's also described. And indeed, we're not assuming that the things we've already started are the only things that need to be done. So therefore, are there any additional activities that we haven't thought of yet that could be done better and meet the needs of industry within the special interest group? So those are the kind of questions we'd be very keen to hear the answers to, either in the Q&A session today, or more likely, or after the event by communication. So please don't hesitate to contact us if you have any comments, ideas, suggestions, critical or otherwise, on what we're trying to do here. You can see our contact details. We're very easily available by all forms of communication. You'll find us on our websites as well. And really now is the opportunity within the webinar for anybody who wishes to ask a question to do so. And I'll ask you, if you remember, what I didn't do earlier on was properly press *6 before you ask a question or make a comment. So now's the time to ask those questions. So if anybody's got anything they want to say, press *6 and fire away. So I'm not hearing any questions, and either that means that nobody wants to ask a question, or they haven't successfully pressed. Thanks.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm Bob Green.
Yes.
And I'm representing the interests of Manchester Metropolitan University,
right.
Faculty of Science and Engineering. And I had 38 years in the chemical industry and spent a lot of time formulating. And normally the first trick is to look at the chemicals you've got on the shelf, select the best options and use brute force. And it works in a lot of instances, but I think with losing the sort of skills of previous formulators, there's a tremendous opportunity for using science, and I'm looking at sort of short courses that MMU may be able to offer. And MMU teach molecular modelling in the chemistry courses, and I've asked the people there, what can it do for formulations? And they've said, don't know. So if you look on Google, the internet, you very quickly stumble across Unilever's Cambridge Centre for Molecular Informatics. And I'm sure that the knowledge that's available in the UK, if it could be rolled out to SMEs, it provides a tremendous opportunity. So I think, speaking as an SME type person, that they want to see quickly what it will do for them. So I think the challenge is to whet their appetite, but with real experience. So thank you for the opportunity to make my point.
Thanks, Bob. You touched on a number of interesting points there. We kind of probably don't have time to discuss them in detail, but first of all, the demographics, that means that skills are getting lost from the industry, which I think is true, not only in formulation. Secondly, opportunities to use science better as a kind of a counterpoint to the brute force approach, which does work, having used that myself in the past. But the opportunities given by science, molecular modelling and modelling techniques identified already, I think, within the special interest group as a really important area in formulation, the potential to do that better, and the SMEs getting access to that kind of high-end expertise. All areas I think are really important. So really important comments, I think. Interested to know, a little bit later, perhaps offline, about the short courses which MMU is offering. Any other comments, please? Questions?
I wonder if I could make a comment. Ian Callahan.
Hi, Ian.
You made a point, I think, at one thing about the loss of knowledge when experienced people leave companies. And I think one thing that I've seen in the various companies I've worked with is that there's never a strategy to make sure that institutional knowledge is retained in some way. At Unilever, we usually got some of the senior formulators, as they began to retire, to start to write down or mentor somebody to take over from. I think a lot of companies don't plan ahead for that, and I think that's something you could well include in your thoughts when you're trying to assist companies in improve formulation expertise. The other thing is, I think you also made the point about looking to areas outside the immediate problem area. Let's say, for example, pharmacy, and where you might learn from other things. And one thing that's not really taught of people very effectively is how to think broadly outside their own field, and there does need to be some way, in my view, of getting people to come in, say specialists in physical chemistry, to actually broaden their horizons and actually learn a bit about chemical engineering and about other areas, so that they can actually take in different ideas from different disciplines in order to effectively develop a formulation. And that means really developing a common language between the various disciplines. In the oil industry, it was quite difficult for chemists quite often to talk to the process engineers, because if you're trying to get an idea across, you work in different units and things like this. And
Hello, Ian, are you still there?
yes, I'm still here.
Yeah, sorry, you just tailed off then.
So that was just the point I was just trying to make. There needs to be a, you've got the chemical engineers here, and you've got the chemists. They do need to try and get a common language, I think, in industry, and find out how to communicate better with each other, because that can, in fact, create some problems in formulation development.
There's a couple of really good points there, I think, about commonality of language and going across industries, and also the reaction to the demographic problem and retaining knowledge. And clearly, Unilever was a company that has been able to plan for that. And actually, if you look at what Jenny was presenting about the uses of the gold standards can be used for succession planning. So I think there's a way of linking that up together. But clearly, you've alluded to some good practice that went on in Unilever, so that's interesting. Any more questions? Comments? I'm assuming that those of you who want to speak have learnt out how to use *6 now. So just to say how this will proceed from here, everybody who's registered for this will be provided with the slides and contact details, and we will also ensure that everybody who is registered will be included going forward on the Formulation Special Interest Group mailing list. So you'll be able to find out what's going on in this part of the Special Interest Group as well as the rest of the Special Interest Group. If that's not enough to whet your appetite, the communication channels of all of the organisations are active in this area. So you'll see via our own website, via Cogent's website, you'll be able to find a bit more about gold standards there. What we're doing is on our website, and the Chemistry Innovation website, which alludes to and focuses on the Special Interest Group in formulation, is the first of those 3 URLs on the slide that you can see there. So thanks very much for your time today, and please do not hesitate offline to get in touch with either Jenny or myself with any further ideas, comments or suggestions you may have. We are provisionally planning for an in-person event on this theme towards the end of the year, but certainly there will be more opportunities to find out what's going on between now and then. So if there are no more comments, questions or comments from Colin's side, then I'll just say thanks for your attendance today, and we'll keep in touch with you. Thanks very much, and goodbye.